welcome to Kids Corner once again, and I want to start off by asking you a question. I wonder what you would like to be whenever you grow up. You can shout your answers out. I just wish that I could hear your answers because I'm sure there's lots of wonderful things that you would like to be. Maybe some of you would like to be teachers, or maybe you would like to work in a shop or be a farmer. Maybe you'd like to work in the hospital or be a mechanic, or maybe something completely different. And it's really fun to think about maybe what you would like to be whenever you are older. But I want to tell you today about a man called Richard, and I want to tell you a little bit about his job. Richard was someone who really did live. It's a true story. It's not a story that we read about in the Bible, but he really was someone who lived. He was from America. Richard Rowe had a wonderful job in that his job was telling people the good news about God. He was able to share with people about how God loved them. He was able to share with them how God made it possible for them to know God. He was able to share with them the hard news that actually every person has sin and disobedience in their life, and that separates them from God. But then how God made it possible that they could be forgiven by sending Jesus to die on the cross and to take our punishment. And not only that, but he was able to tell them how Jesus came back to life again, and how that proved that God has the power to forgive and for people to be able to have that friendship with God once again. What a wonderful job Richard had to be able to do this. He was what we call a missionary, where he left his home and he went to another country to tell people about God. But really, telling people about God is something that all those who love God should want to do. Maybe not everybody will go to another country, but it's something that you can do where you live even now. Maybe it's when you're out in your street playing, or you're spending time with family, or whenever you're in school. You can share with others about how God made it possible so they could be forgiven. Tell them about what God did for you and what God can do for them. And it reminds me of a song. We're just going to have a little listen to this song. What is your mission as someone who loves God?
Go and tell the world, tell them of Jesus, what he's done for us, for you and for me, teaching them of God's commandments, telling them of his great love. This is our mission, possible, telling the world of Jesus. Mission possible, telling the world of what he's done for me. What he's done for me. What he's done for us. This is our mission. Go and tell the world, tell them of Jesus, what he's done for us, for you and for me, teaching them of God's commandments, telling them of his great love. This is our mission, possible, telling the world of Jesus. Mission possible, telling the world of what he's done for me. What he's done for me. What he's done for us. This is our mission.
Well, can you remember the name of Richard's job? It begins with the letter M. Richard was a missionary. He was a missionary. He left his home where he lived in America and he went to a place called the Philippines, far away from his home in America. Maybe you've heard of the Philippines, but the Philippines, there's lots of different islands. And Richard wanted to go in particular to a group of people called the Isnag people. Now, the Isnag people lived far away from any other group of people. They didn't live in the town or the city. In fact, they lived out in the jungle. And it was really actually very difficult to get to this group of people. This group of people, they lived far in the jungle where there was no roads or any buses or trains or planes or anything that would take you there. It was a difficult journey to try and get there. But you know, Richard wanted to bring the good news to this group of people. This group of people were very different from the people that he knew in America. A lot of the people that were in the Isnag group of people were farmers. Some of them farmed rice. Some of them farmed coffee, some farmed corn, and some animals. The houses that they lived in were different from what Richard was used to because they were on like little legs, like little stilts. The people who lived in the Philippines that Richard went to, they had actually never even once heard about God. They had never once heard about Jesus. They didn't have the Bible written down in their language the way you and I do. In fact, it was very, very different from anywhere that Richard had been before. These people, not only did they not have the Bible written in their language, but they didn't have any books at all in their language because their language had never even been written down before. These people were full of fear. They were scared of everything because they didn't know God. But Richard wanted to come to them and to share the good news, to share with them about how they could have a friendship with God and how God made that possible. Richard didn't speak the same language as them, and he tried so hard to try and learn the language. He tried so hard to try and understand the way they did things because it was different from how they did things in America. And one of the ways that he did this was he started eating the same kind of food that they ate, but the food was so different. They would eat rice, lots and lots of rice, which seems okay, but they would have also ate goats and worms and beetles. And I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't fancy having a plate of worms or beetles for my dinner. And neither did Richard, but he knew that it was important if he was to get to know these people that he would spend time with them and that he would try to do some of the things that they would do as well. But there was one way that Richard didn't become like these people, because he didn't become full of fear. Because of course Richard knew God. He loved God, he'd asked God to forgive him, and even though where he was very different from his home and what he was used to, he knew that he could trust God. He knew that God was there with him, and I'm sure he thought often of the little promise that we thought about even a couple of weeks ago. That little promise, remember the 5 words? I will never leave you. And you know, people saw that in Richard's life. They saw that the way he lived was different, that he didn't have this fear. One day Richard was out in the jungle for a walk and he heard a noise. And as he listened carefully, he could hear that it was crying. And as he looked around, he could see where it was coming from. Because over in the jungle, beside a tree, there was a little boy about 6 years old. He was sitting there with his head in his hands and he was crying. This little boy, he so wanted to talk to Richard because he could see that Richard's life was different. And of course, Richard was more than happy to talk to this little boy. But before Richard had a chance, he heard something. Nard, have you done your chores? Nard, have you got that firewood yet? Nard's mum and dad were wanting him to get to work. They were wanting him to do his chores, just like all the Isnag people had different chores to do. Nard was no different. the Isnag people, whether they were adults or children, would do different chores. Some of them would chop wood, some of them would go fishing, some of them would carry water because there was no taps, or gather berries. Lots of different chores that they had to do. But Nard hated chores. Maybe you don't really like chores either, and maybe you can understand what it was like for Nard. Nard thought, if there was only some way that I could get out of doing chores. And as he thought about it, he thought of the perfect solution. He thought, if I went to school, I wouldn't have to do chores. I'm going to ask if I can go to school. See, it was different where Nard lived. You didn't turn 4 and then go into primary 1. You didn't do an exam and see how much you knew and then went to a certain school. This is how people tested if you were ready to go to school or not. If you could take your left arm, put it over your head and hold on to your right ear, that meant that you were ready to go to school. I wonder, would you be ready to go to school if you lived where Nard lived? Let's give it a go. Take your left arm, put it over your head. Can you grip your right ear? Some of you, I'm sure, can. So you're not going to get out of not going to school just by doing that. But you know, for Nard, he was really anxious. The day came when he was seeing if he would be ready to go to school or not. And he got his arm, maybe he stretched it out a little bit. He put it above his head. Thankfully, he was able to grip his ear. Thankfully, he was able to go to school, and he was so excited about it. No more chores. He thought, this is going to be brilliant. But you know, when he arrived in school, school was very different from how he thought. In fact, he found school really super tough. He was given books whenever he arrived, but as he looked at the books, he couldn't even understand them because they were written down in another language. Remember how his language had not yet been written down? And as he looked at these words in the page, he actually had to learn another language first before he could understand the school books. Wouldn't that be so hard? If you went to school and there were no books written down in English, maybe you had to learn another language before you could even start learning your different lessons. It was hard, and Nard didn't like it. And what he would do, he would start to leave for school every morning. He would get his lunch wrapped up in a banana leaf. He would leave. Everyone would think he was going to school, but he wouldn't go to school. In fact, he went into the jungle and he would spend his days there. Nobody knew that Nard was missing school, except for one person. Nard loved to meet up with his friend Richard Rowe, the missionary. Now, Richard didn't know that Nard was supposed to be at school, but they loved to spend time with each other. And as they would spend time with each other, they would teach each other their languages. Richard would point to different things and Nard would tell him how to say them in his language, and Richard would take his notebook and he would make these little squiggles, and this would go on. And Richard was able to teach Nard some English words as well. So, you know, they had lots of fun and they learned lots of things together. But Nard's secret didn't last, because Nard's parents found out what had been happening. They found out that he hadn't been going to school, and they were super cross. They were so cross that they sent Nard to the jungle for the rest of the year to do chores every single day. The next year, Nard returned to school. But you know, this time it was different. In fact, this time Nard was quite surprised because he actually quite enjoyed school. He was given a set of books, but these books were very different from the ones he had been given the last time. Because as he looked at the books, he could actually understand what the books said, because they were actually written down in his language. He was excited. He could understand what the book said, and as he thought about it, he thought back to the time that he'd spent with Richard in the jungle and how Richard had been writing down these things in his notebook. And he thought to himself, that is why Richard's here. Richard was here to write down our language. And I suppose you could say that that was part of it. Richard had come to write down their language, but not just to write school books. You see, the main reason why Richard had come was because he wanted to write down the Bible in Nard's language, in the language that the Isnag people spoke. So it was really important that he learnt the different words. So he was able to write down the Bible in a way that would make sense and that would be right. and that the people, as they would read it, that they could learn about God. He knew how important it was for people to have the Bible in their own language, and it wasn't going to be an easy job, but because it was important, he was patient, even though it took years. Do you know, maybe you have a Bible at home. Do you know, maybe you would even start to read it if you don't already, even just a verse or two a day. Maybe though you don't have a Bible at home, or the Bible that you do have is maybe a little bit tricky for you to understand. If that's the case, we would love to help you out. We would love to send you a Bible that would be suitable for your age, and we will put a little email address later on this program. And if that's you, just write your name and your age, and we will be able to send you a Bible so that you can read it for yourself. Do you know, it took years for Richard to write down the language, but finally he had completed the book of Mark, which is found in the New Testament. And Nard started to read this. Nard was now 14 years old, and as he was reading this, he was really interested and excited to read it for himself, to read about the miracles that Jesus did, to read about some of the amazing things that Jesus did whenever he was here on earth. But as he read on, he started to get really cross. As he started to read about Jesus and how the soldiers treated Jesus and how Jesus died on the cross, Nard got so cross. In fact, he was so cross that he took the book and he threw it. And he started to shake his fist at God and saying, God, why would you allow this to happen to your son? Do you know, Nard understood something very important that day, because as he was feeling this anger towards God, God taught him something. God showed him that the reason why this had happened to Jesus was because God loved Nard. The reason why Jesus had died is because God loves you. You see, God wanted to make it possible for us to be forgiven. The sin in our life, the disobedience in our life, separates us from God, who is perfect. That's why it took something so serious. But yet, Jesus went to the cross to die so that we could be forgiven. And Nard finally understood this. He finally understood that the disobedience in his life was serious. He realised that even like skipping school and how he had lied to his parents, those things were serious enough to separate him from God. And he realised that the only way he could be forgiven is by asking Jesus to forgive him. Do you know, as he read on in Mark, he read how Jesus didn't stay dead, how Jesus came back to life again. And you know, Nard was absolutely amazed by this. He was so excited. And he said to God that day, God, whatever you want me to do, I will do it. Richard, well, when he heard Nard's news, he was absolutely so excited. This was why he had come in the first place, so that people would know God for themselves. And after a little bit of time had passed, Richard had a question for Nard. You see, Nard had been doing really well at school. He had been really studying hard, and Nard was asked by Richard if he wanted to go to high school. Now, that wasn't really something that any of the Isnag people ever did, because they usually just stayed in the jungle and would have worked and farmed and looked after themselves in that way. But Richard asked Nard if he wanted to go to high school, and as Nard thought about this, he thought that would be really wonderful, but he thought the nearest school is 900 miles away. How would I even get there? How would I get to school when it is so far away? Well, one day the Isnag people, they were out, they were doing their chores in the jungle when they heard this really loud noise above them. And as they looked up, they saw something that they had never, ever seen before. And as they looked at it, they thought, it's like a really big bird, except it's made with metal. Can you guess what it was they saw? It was an aeroplane. An aeroplane was coming, and it was delivering some medicine to the people, and it was also able to bring Nard to school. You know, Nard had never been in an aeroplane, he'd never seen one before, so it was really quite a strange experience. He was excited, but he was also a little bit frightened. Do you know, he was able to travel to school in this way, back and forth to the jungle every so often. And Nard was really, really enjoying high school. He was really enjoying the things that he was learning, but above that, he was really, really enjoying learning how to fix the aeroplanes. The pilot one day said to him, "Would you ever think about learning to fly?" And Nard was like, "No, there's no way. There's no way I could fly. I'm just an ordinary boy who is from the jungle. That's not for me." But as he thought about it, he thought about what learning to fly that plane would have meant. And as he thought about what it could mean, he was really excited. And as he thought back to what he had said to God when he asked God to forgive him, how he would do whatever God wanted him to do, he realised that this is what God wanted him to do. God wanted him to learn how to fly a plane. Do you know, Nard worked really hard and he learned how to fly a plane for himself. You can imagine the day when he was in the aeroplane above his village and he was going round in circles, looking down to maybe see some of the people that he knew, how excited he was. He was excited that he was flying the plane, I'm sure, but that's not really why he was so excited. He went round and round and was able to find a place where he could land the plane, and in the plane were lots of boxes. Those boxes were taken out by people that he knew. One of them was his sister, and she got one of the boxes and she put it on her head because that's how they would carry things. And Nard said to her, "Do you know what's in those boxes?" And the sister looked at him, and then he told her. He told her how in those boxes were Bibles, full Bibles written in the language that the Isnag people spoke in. Nard's sister was so excited that she had finally would be able to read the Bible for herself. You know, God used this ordinary little boy to do something wonderful, to bring the Bible back to his village, back to those people who so desperately needed to hear God's word for themselves. God worked an amazing way in that village. You know, as people read the Bible, they saw who God was and how he could forgive them. And many people were forgiven as a result of reading the Bible that Nard was able to bring to the village. Do you know, God uses all of us. Sometimes it's not maybe in ways that we expect, but God can use you whenever you're open to serving him. I wonder though, do you know God? I wonder, have you asked God to forgive you? If you have, we were thinking earlier about how it's important that we share that with others. But if you haven't, maybe even today you would consider asking God to forgive you, and knowing that you will be forgiven when you do that if you are serious about your sin and you want to follow him. There's a little song that we're going to sing in a little minute just to close off. But I said earlier about how if you don't have a Bible, or maybe you don't have a Bible that is simple for you to understand for your age, that we would love to send one to you. And on the screen you'll see a little email address. That's the email address that you can write down your details, or you can get your parent or guardian to send theirs. But if you write, make sure that they write what age you are, so that we know what suitable Bible we would be able to give to you. Hope to see you again. Bye.
Do you know the maker of the sun and rain? The one who came from heaven to give life again. He cares for and he knows you and he loves you so. I'll tell you who it is in case you didn't know. It's Jesus Christ, the way, truth and life. It's Jesus Christ, the way, truth and life. Do you know Christ? Do you know the one who died to set you free? He rose again and now he lives eternally. He's the only way, the Bible tells me so. I'll tell you who it is in case you didn't know. It's Jesus Christ, the way, truth, and life. It's Jesus Christ, the way, truth, and life. Do you know Christ? It's Jesus.